That's awesome. Thank you guys so much for having me. It's really an honor to be here. Just
Yes.
a little bit about myself as well. My name is Freya Proudman. The pronouns I use are she, her. I graduated from Hopkinton High School, so Hopkinton of Massachusetts in 2018, so about 3 years ago now. And I recently just graduated, class of 2021 from university. I graduated with a BA in History, Politics, and Economics from University College London, UCL. And I'm just about to start on a 2-year double master's program in comparative Russian and Eurasian politics from UCL School of Slavonic and East European Studies, which I currently just graduated from, and the Higher School of Economics in St. Petersburg, Russia. So yeah, just based on my degree, it's probably not surprising that my field of concentration is mostly political and social science related research. And I predominantly look at Eastern Europe, the post-Soviet space, Eurasia, and Russia. I was involved in science fair programs my whole 4 years of high school, and I believe that they have been absolutely instrumental in where I am today and the research that I do now. So I'm really, really excited to talk about it.
That's awesome.
It's really awesome. It was really interesting getting to know you. And I just want to dive right into the questions. So we were just thinking about asking you, since, from MSF, you've made such a big journey to where you are now. Could you talk about some of those MSF projects and what you learned from those experiences?
Absolutely. I have definitely learned a lot. So like I said, I have been involved for all 4 years of high school. So I think my first year was like 2014. So it's asking me to go a little far back in my memory. But the first project I ever worked on was I always did kind of social related sciences, so more humanities kind of based. But I think that's kind of the biggest misconception people have about science fair is they think it's only hard sciences, or traditionally what people might call hard sciences. And people think of chemistry, biology, engineering. And for me, I always did more what people would call social sciences. So I looked more at behavioral sciences or political sciences. And I worked mostly with human studies and qualitative studies. So my first year, I did a project on the effects of appreciation on happiness. So I studied different philosophers and their theories of happiness. I looked at Aristotle, Maslow, and essentially I had human subjects do kind of one task of appreciation every day and then answer kind of a set of questions about it. And my first year, my project completely didn't work because I'd never worked with humans before, and human surveys can be really challenging to design because I was trying to study qualitative things like happiness, but also trying to have quantitative data with numbers. And how do you take happiness and make it into numbers? So there was so many things I learned, such as, how to design surveys properly, how to take qualitative concepts to operationally define them, and maybe use a scale or a rubric to be able to give you that quantitative data as well. Yeah, I didn't get the data I wanted, and that was such an experience for me, as I never expected my project to kind of completely fall apart. And I was kind of, at the end of the year, I had no data, so I participated in the science fair, but I said, I don't have any data to give you because this is what went wrong with my study. But my sophomore year of high school, I decided, you know what? I'm not done with this project yet. This is a project I'm passionate about. I've done a lot of research on it, and I'm confident I can make it work. And what I really wanted to do was apply what I'd learned from kind of that trial and error run and apply it to sophomore year. So by the end of the year, I'd actually won the school science fair. So when they really say people can make a comeback, we could make a comeback, because I went from 0 to 100 pretty quick. But essentially what I did is, it's because I spent that whole year kind of applying what I learned from the way that I'd applied my study wrong in the first year. And I used all that knowledge to improve. And that was a really big experience for me academically, in research, but also as a person, kind of believing in yourself and continuing to learn, although it was really challenging. So I had a much better experience second year. I had all my data and everything worked out really nicely. So I competed in the school fair. And then unfortunately I couldn't keep on moving because I wasn't able to qualify for the regional fair because of something I did with the repeating the study, because I did it like twice in a row because it didn't work the first year. But then in my junior year, I did a new project, and I did a project on women's optimism for their futures. So I did another qualitative study where I interviewed participants, so mostly survey data, interview data, and I asked them about what sort of factors were holding young women back from getting the dreams that they wanted, and what sort of obstacles we could identify from that. And then what I wanted to do was, once I had identified those obstacles through research, make recommendations of policy or practices that we could use to improve the situation for women, so that more women felt that there was less barriers to achieving their dreams and their goals, like university, etc. So this is what I learned from this experience, was that not only do I love doing research, but I love doing research that I can apply to real life situations and real world scenarios. So for example, when a lot of women said, financial aid and money was a factor to holding them back to different job opportunities or university or whatever their dreams were. So then I can go and take that information and then make recommendations like, okay, maybe we need to be supporting more scholarships for women, or we need to be, investing in science fair programs for women, etc. So research doesn't just end at research. You can take that and you can apply it. And I think that's what's really exciting. So that's how I really got into kind of political research, was that I could do research and then use it to make policy recommendations or recommendations to government for what they could do. And then my final year project in senior year was actually with my brother. So we were a sibling duo, and we did it on social media and well-being in adolescence. So I looked at behavioral patterns of teens across Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And we were essentially looking at things like self-worth, confidence, and what we could get from how people interacted with these social media platforms, what that could tell us about their well-being. And we didn't place at the school fair, unfortunately, because we'd forgotten to run our statistical significance tests, which, everyone says is a very rookie mistake, which I made as a senior, but it happens to the best of us. So very quickly, we realized that there was something wrong with our research. And what this was is because I'd never done a comparative study before, because I was looking at comparing Twitter to Facebook to Instagram, and I hadn't properly controlled for all my variables. So when I went to compare the numbers, somebody pointed out, hey, this doesn't make sense. You can't compare it like this because you haven't run statistical significance tests. So then we had to do a lot more data. And then we came back at the regional fair, came with force, and eventually we were given an honorable mention at the state fair. So that was a really good experience to finish senior year with an honorable mention at the state fair, because that was the highest I'd ever gone. So yeah, that was kind of a long overview of all the different projects I've done. And then from this experience that I did in high school, I've done further research at university. So my current field of research is actually the treatment of LGBT people in Eastern Europe. And that's the sort of work that I do now, which I'm happy to speak more about, or how I ended up there from this, whatever you guys want to hear about.
Yeah, that's really interesting. That was actually exactly what we were going to ask you, is how did you get from your MSF projects to where you are now?
Yeah, absolutely. So the research that I do now is I worked predominantly with LGBT communities. So I've just completed a year-long research project on the treatment of LGBT people in Hungary and Poland. So what I had to do is I had to collect all my own data, design my whole own study, interview LGBT activists to collect that data, and then essentially write it up in a report. And all these skills are skills that I learned in high school doing research. So because of that experience I had in high school, it gave me the foundation to be able to do research like this, which is really important to me. So when I got to my senior year of university and they said, right, pick a research topic, I could really dream big and do exactly what I was passionate about, because I was coming in with such solid research skills. And a lot of the mistakes I made, in high school that I learned from, meant that I was able to be really successful at university with research. So what I look at is I look at mostly policy. So I spent a year looking at LGBT legal protections. So what legal protections do Hungary and Poland have? So maybe it's, protection against discrimination in employment or hate crimes. And then I looked at how these legal protections are implemented, executed, and enforced in a country. So how they're applied. And then what I did is I interviewed LGBT people about whether or not the laws and legal protections are having an impact in their everyday lived experiences as being an LGBT person in that country. So essentially looking at the application of legal rights in everyday life and looking beyond them to see what sort of social experiences still exist beyond law that continue to marginalize people and discriminate against the queer communities in Eastern Europe. And it was a really eye-opening experience. And because of this research, like I said, I can now make recommendations to places like NGOs and civil society organizations or government, and say like, look, I've done this research, like the laws say one thing, but on the ground in practice, research shows, qualitative research shows that people are still very discriminated against and their everyday lives are not as good as your legal foundations are showing. So therefore, then you can go to government and say, this is what the LGBT communities in your country need for more support. This is what we can do. And that's how important research is and how research has an application to everyday life. And that started, with my junior year project when I was looking at women's optimisms for their futures. I realized I can take research beyond just my notebook or just my research project. I can take it and I can make recommendations, or I can use it to actually improve people's lives. And that's how I got really involved in working with LGBT people, because in my personal life, I'm really involved with LGBT activism. And I thought, what better way to combine the two things I'm really passionate about is, LGBT activism and research. And I was like, it's like the mega pot of everything, is being able to like contribute to the LGBT community through my research is really, really important to me. And that is something I'm hoping to continue. In my master's degree is I have to do more research, looking to continue researching on LGBT communities. Yeah.
I think it's really interesting that you just said that, because a lot of the times research is about finding answers and supporting things that, supporting different things that, you know the answers to, and you want to present those findings. And I think that there's a sense of pride and satisfaction associated with that, especially when it comes to something that you're passionate about, like you said, helping the LGBTQ community. And I think it's really interesting that you said that, and it's really inspiring to hear about how you've taken those MSF projects and sometimes some things that you didn't know a lot about into creating something that you're very proud of and exploring upon your skills. So I think that's really interesting. And
yeah, that sounds amazing.
Yeah, definitely. And kind of going off of that, do you think that, can you pinpoint at something like a story where in your research, in your education, in your career, has there ever been one specific moment where you thought back to MSF, the projects that you did, and you were able to say, that's a skill that is accelerated compared to, because I've done MSF before, and now I know how this works, and I'm so glad that this happened this way. Do you think that you have a specific moment or specific skill that came out of MSF that you're very proud of?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like all of my research skills, I would not be the researcher I am today. I would not have been able to do that LGBT research that I was just talking about if it wasn't for MSF. So every day I'm very grateful for MSF. I think, wow, this is where I got my beginnings. This is what sparked my passion. So maybe not a specific moment, but every year at Hopkinton High School, I come back to the high school and I beg kids to do the science fair. I said, please do the science fair program. Please, please, please. I said, even if you think, oh, I don't want to be a scientist, everyone uses research skills. It's not just, chemists and biologists. Like I'm, doing politics, and I use research every day. Research is such a critically important skill that everyone can benefit from. So, even if you're not necessarily, super interested in chemistry or biology, I would still encourage you to do science fair, because the research skill is just so necessary. So yeah, probably not a specific moment, but every day, I'm very grateful for that experience that I got through MSF, because it's how I learned to do research, and it's where I found some of my greatest supporters. Valerie Lachansky, Miss Lachansky, was my science fair mentor all 4 years of high school. And no one has believed in me as much as she has. She has seen me through highs and lows of my research. So when I think of MSF, I think about, Miss Lachansky and, how much she believed in me. And, I would come to her crying sometimes because I'm like, I forgot to run this test. My data's falling apart. I don't know what's going on. And she was always there to support. So I think back on MSF, I think of, really supportive people who encouraged me and, didn't let me kind of give up on my projects or give up on myself. And, I am who I am and I am the research who I am because of participating in the MSF programs every year and because of the support systems I gained from it with the teachers that, still today continue to support me in my research, even though I've been out of high school 4 years. So yeah, I'm very, very, very grateful. And that's why I'm here trying to beg other students to get involved too, because it's really the best thing you can do in high school is learn these skills.
Yeah, wow, that's really inspiring. It sounds like MSF was a really transformative experience for you. It's so great to hear that. So I think you already talked a little bit about how you are now involved in research and advocating for the LGBT community. Could you maybe talk about a little bit more about what you are doing today and what's a general description of a day in your life and how you apply these skills?
Yeah, absolutely. So at the moment, I'm still a student. So it's summer for me. So I just graduated from my undergraduate program and I'm waiting for my master's program to start in about 6 weeks. So a typical day for me at the moment is usually just I'm resting as much as I can over the summer. But a normal day for me would be in full-time education. So attending courses at the university, lots of studying. And like I said, is working on my research projects. I'm very grateful that I go to a university that encourages us to do our own research. And considering that science fair was such a big part of my high school career, I very much wanted to go to a university where I could continue to do research. So I do a lot of independent research, and that means reading. Some of the best research you will do is when you're really knowledgeable on the topic. So things that I'm interested in, I read about. So I read scholarly journals, I read what, other experts in the field are saying about the topic or what sort of they're doing, or like trying to stay on top of kind of the cutting edge research or the research methodologies is always really, really helpful. So I do a lot of reading, but there's never any wasted reading. All reading is helpful to you. So yes, lots of classes, lots of essay writing and work on my projects, but also outside of being a student and my academics, I take part in other like extracurricular activities, which I love. I'm on the dance team at university, so not research related, but also something I really enjoy. I also am a student researcher at my university's think tank. And so you'll see a lot of researchers, especially in political science like me, working at think tanks. And they're essentially organizations that kind of accumulate knowledge and do research on topics. So this year I was part of the student think tank at my university, and I sort of applied to it and got on, and then they kind of assigned me a project, which was really different to what I've ever done before, because in the past I've always got to pick my project. So I ended up working on AI, so artificial intelligence, and how it's going to impact the American and the Chinese militaries and how it might contribute to a militarized interstate dispute, which is a show of force or a demonstration or threat of force between the two countries. So looking essentially at international relations. And this was like completely out of my element. I didn't know anything about AI. But I got onto this think tank and they said, this is the topic you've been assigned to research. Um, and I was like completely out of my comfort zone. But what I realized is because I have good research skills, you can really do anything, even if you get thrown into a completely different topic that's not really your element or your research specialty. If you've got strong research skills, those are transferable. It doesn't matter what you're researching. If you know the methodologies, you know how to do thematic analysis, or you know how to do great quantitative studies, comparative political analysis. If you know those skills, you can use them wherever you go. And that was actually kind of exciting for me to see that like the skills that I have are not just applicable in my own interests, but I can do other things too. And you kind of shock yourself, and it's really eye-opening, and I really enjoyed that because of it. Because of my research skills, I got involved in a topic that I didn't know a lot about, and I learned a lot from being part of that. And again, all because of the research skills I had, which gave me that experience.
That's so cool. I just wanted to share that I'm also a dancer, so that was really cool to hear that you're a dancer.
Yeah, that's awesome.
That's very cool. I found that to be really interesting because you talked a lot about your challenges as well as how you've turned them into successes and how you've made them your stepping stones. And I think that you might be the perfect person to ask this question, because when it comes to researchers and research and STEM in general, there are a lot of challenges that people don't talk about. And since you've mentioned going out of your comfort zone when it came to being assigned a project where you had to use your research skills, or when it came to your project in freshman year, you've talked a lot about your challenges. And I think that I want to ask you, what advice would you give for students that may be watching this, that are going through their challenges in their science fair projects or with the scientific world in general? What advice would you give for them?
Yeah, that's a good one. Oh, there's so many things. The most important advice I would say is, I know it sounds cheesy, but believe in yourself, believe in your research and what you're doing, and just keep on going. Don't let anything stop you. Like I said, in freshman year, the first time I did the science fair program, my project completely fell apart. But you have to keep going. If it's something you really believe in, don't let anything stop you. I think what I really learned was to stand up for myself and be proud of the research that I'm bringing. I think most of the time I felt kind of intimidated sometimes at the state fair or the regional fair, because like I said, my project was more of social sciences, so looking at behavioral science or even more psychology in a sense. And because of it, I didn't feel like I was bringing the most sciencey project, or I felt like other kids who had like chemistry projects or biology or engineering were so much more impressive, and I kind of developed a little bit of like an inferiority thing. And then I realized, no, I should be proud of the research that I have done. And the research I have done is still really good research. And, it's well executed, it's well researched, it's well done. So, I need to believe in myself. And yeah, just because I didn't have a hard science, I wasn't bringing a chemistry project, I was bringing something like, a human studies or survey, a qualitative project. That doesn't mean that my project was less than. So I think really, like, especially if you're one of those kids out there, like at the time, I remember being at the state fair in 2018, and there was probably only a handful of topics or projects that were like mine, that were like social sciences. And I just wanted to say to like all those kids out there that might be doing a social science project, who might be looking around and you're surrounded by like chemistry and biology, and you might feel like your project isn't good enough. It is. It is. The research you're doing is still valid and important, and you should keep pursuing what you're passionate about. Don't be intimidated by other people. Believe in yourself and you will be amazing, do amazing things. That's what's most important. But to just all the kids, whether or not you're doing a social science project or not, believing in yourself is really halfway there. I know that is so cliche, but you have to, especially when research can be so challenging and it's so easy for like things to go wrong. Things always go wrong. It's not a research project if everything goes right, because things are meant to go wrong, but you have to get through it and you have to just take it in stride. And, that should be what drives you. So, to all those people out there that have had something fail completely horribly in their science fair project, I believe in you. Keep believing in yourself. You will make it through, I promise.
That's so inspirational. Thank you so much for talking about that. And I think maybe in the same vein, do you have any advice for high schoolers, juniors, or seniors who are looking into the college application process? Do you have any advice for those looking into colleges and their futures?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good one too. I think, yeah, kind of just staying in line with what I've been saying is just stay true to you. And, I think in the college application process, there is a lot of pressure to, present yourself a certain way, or, to come off as a student sort of person or a student. And the best you can do in the college application process, in life, in research, is be true to who you are and your passions, and show people who you are. Let those colleges see who you are and see what you're passionate about, because that's how people fall in love with you, is they fall in love with your passion and your beautiful, true, authentic self. So, don't ever try to be somebody else. Don't ever try to, force yourself into a little box. Like, be you, and, stand out and be confidently you. And that's really the best thing you can do. I think also college applications sort of more, I guess, formulaic things I would recommend. Obviously, get on it early. Like, don't leave it to the last minute because that can just be a little bit of a nightmare. And do your research. I feel, yeah, do your research. Look into the universities that you are looking at. See what they offer. Ask questions. Say, I love research. Do you have, opportunities for undergrads to do research? What sort of access to labs do you have? Ask those questions. And yeah, that's really what I recommend. Do your research, ask your questions, and just stay true to who you are. Yeah.
I think that's really helpful for a lot of people that might be watching. And I noticed that you mentioned, staying true to yourself. And when I read about you, I noticed before, how you've talked about who you are. And before starting this interview, I found it really interesting that you traveled a lot. And I wondered if that had something to do with your research, your passions. Could you talk a little bit more about that, please?
Yeah, absolutely. I have been very lucky that I've been able to be educated in high school in the US, and I did my undergrad in London in the UK, and now I'm about to do my postgrad in Russia. So I really like to travel, and I know I'm very, very lucky to have that opportunity. When you do research in different places, um, you get to work with different academics and people who have different perspectives. So coming to London and doing history of Eastern Europe, I was able to be surrounded by people from the region, and I felt like I was given a very different perspective than I might have had sort of in Massachusetts. So I kind of traveled so that I would get different academic perspectives on certain topics. And also, it's when I wanted to do research of Europe. So like I said, I did my LGBT studies of Hungary and Poland. It's obviously a little bit helpful to be in London, which is closer to the region than, because Massachusetts is very far. So the proximity being in Europe is very helpful for wanting to do research on the ground. So for me, one of the big reasons I'm heading out to Russia is because hopefully I'd like to do my research on the ground, sort of in Russia, so that I'm close to the people I might want to interview or the communities. So when you travel, it gives you kind of more opportunities to do different things with your research that I might not otherwise would have had the chance to do. I also just think going abroad, if you have that experience, whether it's like me doing your whole degree abroad, or maybe it's just doing study abroad for a summer or a semester or a whole year, it's just great. It's just great to get a different perspective, meet different people, meet different academics, work in labs abroad, sort of thing. I would really, really recommend it to anyone to consider going abroad if you have that opportunity in college.
Thank you so much. We wish you the best in your studies, and that sounds like a really interesting position you're going to be in. So we're really excited about that.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for having me. Really, I'm so, so, so happy to be here. Like I said, MSF has given me so much. So even if I can just give a little bit back to them, it's great. So yeah, any students are welcome to contact me to ask me questions or anything. I'm always happy to work with people, help people, because I was a high schooler just like you guys. So yeah, thank you so much. It's been really, really nice to meet you guys. And I wish you guys all the best of luck with your research projects as well.
Thank you. And thank you so
Very
much.
much.